Hi, I'm Dave Palmer. Thanks for joining me on this very important video as we talk about St. Thomas Aquinas and how he might respond to the existentialism of the 20th century French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. And I think what I'm about to explain is a pretty reasonable explanation of how Christians can respond to somebody like Sartre, whose philosophy is still very influential in our culture today, as I hope to explain as we go along. All right, so first of all, a little bit about Jean-Paul Sartre. He lived in the 20th century, died in 1980, so he's very contemporary, born in 1905. He was French, he was atheist, philosopher, author, and humanist. His famous books included Being and Nothingness, and also Existentialism is a Humanism, along with a lot of other books as well. Sartre believed in the essential freedom of individuals, and that as free beings, human beings are responsible for all elements of their lives, including their consciousness and their actions. That is, with total freedom comes total responsibility. Now you can see how this would be very appealing to people, because it's like, yeah, we want to be free agents. We want to be able to exercise our free will and make decisions and choose this or choose that. So this is a very kind of freeing type of philosophy, and that's why Sartre remains very popular to this day. But look at this next thing. He says humans are condemned to be free. Okay, that's a direct quote from him. We create ourselves. So he saw in this freedom that humans have results in anxiety. It results in a bit of consternation, because it's all on us to determine who we are going to be. This conflict between, now get this, he says, the conflict between oppressive, spiritually destructive conformity and an authentic way of being became the dominant theme of Sartre's early work. So he saw, of course, religion as being oppressive, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll see that really just the opposite is true. His philosophy is oppressive and not the philosophy of Christianity as explained by St. Thomas Aquinas. All right, so Sartre's theory of existentialism, which we're talking about in this video, states that existence precedes essence, that it is only by existing and acting in a certain way do we give meaning to our lives. According to him, there is no fixed design or purpose in how a person should be, and there exists no God to give human beings or anything else a purpose. All right, so if you're talking about purpose, you go all the way back to Aristotle, because he had a teleological way of looking at the world. Even before Christ, Aristotle said that things have purpose, things have meaning, and things are designed for a specific end. Okay, this is Aristotle, and of course St. Thomas Aquinas as well. But with existence preceding essence, that means in Sartre's view, we are born, we have existence, and then we create ourselves almost out of nothing. We can create ourselves in anything we want. It's up to us, right? Sartre was influenced by the ideas of the famous German philosophers like Immanuel Kant. I did a video on him last week. Georg Hegel, Friedrich Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger. And he also, importantly, influenced French feminist philosopher Simone de Beauvoir, whom he lived with in an open relationship for over 50 years. Interestingly, never got married, never had children, and they had other lovers, and so it was a very kind of hedonistic type of relationship that they had. All right, so bottom line here is that Sartre believed in freedom, but it was an oppressive kind of freedom, okay? It was one that weighed heavily upon a person, because all of the decisions and all of the onus of responsibility on what one will become is on us. All right, so let's compare this to St. Thomas Aquinas. Okay, he asks in the 12th question of the first part of the Summa, whether any created intellect can see the essence of God. All right, so he says, for the ultimate beatitude of man consists in the use of his highest function, which is the operation of his intellect. Okay, we all realize that we have intellect, right? If we suppose that the created intellect could never see God, it would either never attain to beatitude, or its beatitude would consist in something else besides God, which is opposed to faith. For, and this is important, there resides in every man a natural desire to know the cause of any effect which he sees, and thence arises wonder in men. But if the intellect of the rational creature could not reach so far as to the first cause of things, the natural desire would remain void. So in Aquinas' worldview, the Christian worldview, we see a scene like this sunrise, this beauty, and we wonder, where did it come from? That it has to come from outside of us. There is a God who created this. It's cause and effect. In Sartre's worldview, there's no such thing because we're too busy trying to create who we are without a God, and so none of this makes any sense. And so we don't associate the beauty and the wonder of the outside world with our destiny. We don't say, hey, maybe the one who created that is the one who I can get to know. Maybe that's the same person the same being that created me, right? So also in the Christian worldview, we have a belief in a Trinity, okay? So we have intellect, we have will, we know that. And Thomas talks about this beautiful teaching, which is a supernatural teaching, of course, sacred doctrine about the Blessed Trinity. The divine processions within the Trinity can be derived only from the actions which remain within the agent. In a nature which is intellectual and in the divine nature, these actions are two, the acts of the intelligence and of the will. So now we realize that this creator, this being who created the world that we naturally are curious about, we are similar to this this being, and that we have intellect and will. So again, should create curiosity in us. Okay, he goes on and says, whether it is proper to the rational nature to act for an end. Okay, so now this is teleology. This is purpose. This is meaning. It means that there's meaning, there's purpose in all of creation. Okay, this is very Aristotelian and very Thomistic. Okay, it's not Sartre. He says, Thomas says, every agent of necessity acts for an end. All right, it must be observed that the thing tends to an end by its action or movement in two ways. First, as a thing moving itself to the end as man. Secondly, as a thing moved by another to the end, as an arrow tends to a determinate end through being moved by the archer who directs his action to the end. Therefore, those things that are possessed of reason move themselves to an end. Now, this almost sounds similar to Sartre, okay? Because Sartre would say we're born, we have existence, and then we create ourselves. So, to some degree, Thomas is agreeing here, because the rational creature moves itself to an end. But there's a huge difference, okay? So let's keep going here, because they have dominion over their actions through their free will, which is the faculty of will and reason. But those things that lack reason tend to an end by natural inclination as being moved by another and not by themselves, since they do not know the nature of an end as such, and consequently cannot ordain anything to an end, but can be ordained to an end only by another. Okay, that's why I have a picture of ducks on this page, because ducks fly south in the winter and they go from, let's say, Canada to Mexico, not because they made a decision to do so, but because they are being moved by God. But Thomas is making a distinction here and saying, well, we have free will, so we move ourselves, but in a very different way than Sartre was explaining, because to Sartre it was a source of anxiety. It was a source of like this oppressive responsibility that we had to make something of ourselves, but we have no guidance. There's nothing that's helping us along the way. All right, so let's move on here. For the entire rational nature is in comparison to God as an instrument to the principal agent. Consequently, it is proper to the rational nature to tend to an end as directed and leading itself to the end, whereas it is proper to the irrational nature to tend to an end as directed or led by another, whether it apprehend the end, as do our irrational animals, or do not apprehend it, as is the case of those things which are altogether void of knowledge. Okay, so in Thomas's worldview, God does direct some things to their end of necessity without free will, like all the irrational creatures, like every species of creatures except for the angels and the human beings, but we have free will. Okay, so, but again, we're not left on our own. This is not a source of anxiety. This is actually a source of excitement. This is a source of what should be very positive for us. Okay, so finally, whether man wills all whatever he wills for the last end. Now here's where Thomas's teaching really becomes beautiful. He says, man must of necessity desire all whatsoever he desires for the last end. What's the last end? The last end is God. Okay, this is evident for two reasons. First, because whatever man desires, he desires it under the aspect of good. That's one of the attributes of God, is that God not only is good, God is goodness, right? And if he desire it not as his perfect good, which is the last end, he must of necessity desire it as tending to the perfect good, because the beginning of anything is always ordained to its completion, as is clearly the case in effects both of nature and of art. Wherefore every beginning of perfection is ordained to complete perfection, which is achieved through the last end. Secondly, because the last end stands in the same relation in moving the appetite as the first mover of other movements. Okay, so God being our last end and being goodness himself is moving us to our final end, because he, being perfect goodness himself, is putting all these good things in the world, like hot fudge sundaes. I have the picture up there, okay? So when we're attracted to a hot fudge sundae, why? Because it's good, because it's attractive, because we desire it. It has a resemblance to God, because God is goodness himself. So the entire world and everything that we're attracted to is good, and it all participates in the goodness of God. All right, so now it is clear that secondary moving causes do not move save it as much as they are moved by the first mover. Therefore, secondary objects of the appetite do not move the appetite except as ordained to the first object of the appetite, which is the last end. Okay, so this is the big difference between the existentialism of Sartre, where we are on our own. It's like showing up for work the first day. There's no mentors, there's no boss. You are on your own, and you got to create your own reality, because all you have is existence and no essence and nothing to go by. And that creates anxiety, even by Sartre's own. But it's freedom, but it's a freedom of anxiety. Whereas the Thomistic worldview says, yeah, we have free will and we can make decisions, but God is helping us all along the way, and God is guiding us because he has put everywhere in the world good things, beauty, goodness, excellence, perfection, and they all are a reflection of him. So he gently is guiding us to our final end, and we're not on our own, and we're not left to our own devices, because he gives us the sacraments, and he gives us theological virtues, and he gives us the gratuitous graces, and he gives us his grace and the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and all these things that are helping us but not forcing us to our final end. That's the beauty of Christianity, and that's how it differs from the despair of the freedom of existentialism as described by Jean-Paul Sartre. God bless you.